excited to see you all tonight. Thank you so much, Mayor Rivera, again, for hosting this very important conversation in your fair city of Lawrence in this lovely school here. Representatives, school committee members, very nice to see you as well. Thank you so much for joining us. I would also like to welcome our audience watching live on our webcast, thanks to our partnership with WCVB TV. I see some familiar faces from other community meetings we've had across the state. Good to see you all again. And we'll look forward to hearing from you and folks here gathered who have, I'm sure, questions and ideas. Whether this is your first meeting or your fifth, we appreciate you all taking the time out of your very busy schedules on a lovely evening to join us tonight for this conversations. We want your input, we want your ideas, and your questions as well as we continue to develop our bid for Boston 2024 over the next 2.5 years. Our bid will be stronger because of your active engagement, and we thank you for that. We've structured the agenda for the meeting this evening with a brief presentation just to catch you up on where we are with our bid process, some updates, and certainly plenty of time for questions and answers and discussion as well. We would like this meeting to be as productive as possible. We want to hear from you, get a lot out of it, so that you get a lot out of it, and so do we. We encourage everyone just to follow a few simple ground rules when we do our question and answers later, and we will do the same. We ask folks to be concise, to be constructive and respectful as well of the various opinions in the room. Just a couple of other housekeeping notes. You should have all received a green card when you arrived. If you are interested in further involvement with our bid, we encourage you to fill out that card and give it back to one of our volunteers or staff members circulating throughout the room. We also distributed a list of 10 principles that we have established as we continue with this bid and have committed to, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, only pursuing the bid if those 10 principles are achieved. I'd like to ask you folks, as you're listening to our presentation and when we begin the questions and discussion later on, to think about those principles, read through them, think about which one is the most important to you, and how you would encourage us or suggest to us how best to achieve those that are important to you. So think about that, and hopefully we'll hear some of your feedback later on in the discussion. With that housekeeping completed, let's get started. I would like to introduce, one moment. Is that better? Is that better? Okay, here we go, trying again. I'd like to introduce one of my colleagues, David Manfredi, founding principal of Elkis Manfredi Architects and co-chair of our Boston 2024 Master Planning Committee. He's a renowned champion of the protection of urban spaces in Boston and throughout the world. Everything he designs is through the lens of sustainability and environmental preservation. David will speak shortly about our planning concepts and legacy opportunities. Now it's my pleasure to introduce a very special guest who personifies the true power of sport. Ruben Sansa, a Dorchester native who competed in the 2012 London Games in long distance running, and I believe also just completed the Boston Marathon again. Now works at UMass Lowell. Ruben is also training for the Rio Games next year, so we're very lucky that he took a quick break from his training regimen tonight to join us and share a few comments about his experiences competing in the Games. He's been one of the foremost leaders of our Olympic and Paralympic Movement Committee and is a shining example of the true power of sport. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Ruben to the microphone.
Thank you, Nico. Thanks all for being here today. I would like to really just, thank you all for just being here. You're already being part of the movement for Boston 2024. I would like to maybe share a little bit of my experience of, how I got started with running and how I eventually made it to the Olympics and some of my experience at the Olympic Games. I was born in Cape Verde, an archipelago off the coast of Africa. I came to U.S. when I was 12 years old with my family, my brothers. We lived in my grandfather's house. We actually shared a very small room. We slept on the floor for the first 6 months. And eventually I I had good grades. I was able to go to a good high school and eventually went to UMass Lowell to pursue a business degree. And now I work at UMass Lowell as a full-time staff. So with one of the things that I really take a lot about sports is the goal setting. You know, when I was here, when I was a very young student in school, you know, I needed some direction. I needed something else to do besides just going to school. And my parents, they brought me here to U.S. to go to school, but also having to not just go to school, but do something else, such as sports, helped me, you know, be able to set my goals and achieve my goals. And the same way that it helped me in the classroom, it also helped me when I was running. And I'll tell you a little story about how I started running. I started running because I was a good soccer player, and eventually my coach said, "Oh, you know, let's put him on the track and see what he can do." But when I first started actually winning races, my parents were actually they were not happy about that. I came home one day and I said, "Hey, you know, I won a race today," and I thought my parents would be happy. But actually, they said, "We don't want you winning races anymore." And I was a little bit puzzled, and I said, "Why?" Being in the country for, you know, the first 2 years, my parents were actually scared that if I won races, other kids from other schools and other teams, they would be angry at me and maybe cause some harm to me. So my parents were very concerned, you know, about my safety. That was first, you know, besides just winning races. So when I grew up in Boston, in Dorchester area, Roxbury, and I got the chance to volunteer at the Boston Marathon. And for me, it was an amazing experience, seeing all these international runners come into Boston. At the time, I was just starting to run, and it was an experience that I think definitely motivated me to continue running and go after those goals. But at the time, you know, just like when you are a little kid, you see things on TV and you think, you know, that's really almost impossible. But seeing is actually believing. And by being there at the Boston Marathon, it was able to motivate me to become a runner. And as I grew older, I continued to set my goals and work really, really hard, you know, every single day, year after year. And eventually I made it to the 2012 Olympic Games. And that brings me now to some of my experience at the Olympic Games and why I think Boston is not only we can host an Olympics, we can probably host one of the best Olympics ever. And to me, that's very important. We're setting the pace for what is going to become a very sustainable Olympics. And it's my pleasure to be involved in this. And I hope that you can be a part of it and spread the word and get to learn about how this Olympics is going to help not only the city, but also the kids who are out there right now and are going to be inspired by these Olympic Games like I was inspired when I watched the Boston Marathon. So thank you for being here today. I really appreciate all your support.
Thank you, Ruben. Truly an inspiration for sure, and you have our best wishes and good luck as you continue with your training, and we will root you on and cheer you on from now until Rio, and hopefully beyond that as well. Okay, so now into our presentation, why we're here. We are here in Lawrence as a continuation of our ongoing conversations with our communities all across the Commonwealth, in addition to the 9 citywide community meetings that Mayor Walsh is hosting in the city of Boston. We are also launching, or we have launched, a series of 20 statewide community meetings across the state over the next 20 weeks. And we're about halfway into that, our listening sessions across the state. As I mentioned to you, our commitment to our future, those 10 principles, again, you should have a copy of those. Looking forward to hearing from you all again, which of these principles you think is the most important and why, and also what you think we should be doing in order to achieve those principles that are important to you. We're here, as many of you know, because the United States Olympic Committee selected Boston out of 4 other cities, thank you, in January of this year. We believe that this is a very historic moment and a very unique opportunity for us to bring the Games back home to the United States after what would be 28 years. As we all know, Boston and Massachusetts represent everything that we celebrate as Americans: the power of innovation, the empowerment of education, the power of sport, as Ruben has mentioned, our competitive drive. So we think that this is our moment as Bostonians, as Lawrencians, as Massachusetts folks, to represent the US in a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, our moment to define our future and to have a conversation about how we collectively envision our region and our state in the decades to come, well beyond 2024. We believe that the Games will be good for Boston and for Massachusetts. Hosting the Olympics will lead to benefits that will last long after the Games. For example, major improvements to public transportation, infrastructure, new housing created, as well as improved sports and recreational facilities. And we do know, the data shows that hosting the Games will stimulate the economy, boost tourism, and grow jobs. This is a quick snapshot of an economic analysis report conducted by the Boston Foundation. And as you can see, estimated billions of dollars in jobs and economic impact in construction, operations, and tourism as well. Just want to make sure that folks know it is a proven fact, and again, the data shows that the last 3 Olympic Games in the United States have been profitable. Salt Lake in 2002, Atlanta in '96, and Los Angeles in 1984. Hosting the Games will unite communities, bolster civic pride, and create social legacies to enrich our cities. So those 3 cities that I just mentioned use the profits, use the proceeds from their games to support community activities, to support youth sport organizations. I think the best example, and of course also to create community and recreation space, the best example is the LA 84 Foundation, which, as you saw before, generated about a $200 million surplus from their operating games, which was used to establish an endowment for the LA 84 Foundation to provide grants and opportunities for youth sport programs all across Southern California. And to this day, 31 years later, the LA 84 Foundation is still supporting youth sports across Southern California. We've had the very unique opportunity and great pleasure to meet one of the leaders of the LA 84 Foundation, Anita DeFrance, recently here in Boston, and she speaks very passionately about the opportunities for young people that the foundation has been providing. We also believe that Boston and Massachusetts as a host city will be good for the Games itself, for the Olympic movement. With our world-class universities, our innovation economy, our love of sport that we all know is unrivaled. As Ruben said, we have the opportunity here in Boston to deliver the most sustainable, most innovative, most inspiring games in the history of the Olympic movement. And David will speak a little bit more about some of those innovative and legacy opportunities that we can pursue here in Boston, here in Massachusetts. Our bid also aligns with the International Olympic Committee's Agenda 2020, which is a series of 40 reforms that the IOC adopted in December to pursue a more manageable, cost-effective, and sustainable games. Our plan, David will speak to, is very tightly integrated with that plan, and is also very aligned with the future planning for the City of Boston and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Now I'm going to turn it over to David to talk a little bit more about our planning concepts and some ideas we have for venues.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting us to Lawrence. I want to talk a little bit about where we are in the process and what it means. I think most people know that back in December 1st of 2014, we submitted an official bid to the United States Olympic Committee to be the host city, to be Boston's, America's representative as the host city for the 2024 Games. On January 8th, we were awarded that designation. And now we enter another phase of the process, and it really is a very different phase of the process. We now have an almost 2.5-year period of preparing a submission, defending that submission, probably making a significant number of changes as it works its way through the process. But what's changed? We initially submitted what was really a proof of concept. It was proof that Boston and the Commonwealth were capable of hosting the games. Now we've got to get much more specific. And our venue planning has really been informed now by a lot of different input. We have a partnership with the United States Olympic Committee. They are very much involved in all of our venue planning now. In fact, they are permanently located, some of their senior staff are permanently located in Boston. And that has definitely informed the plan. But also community engagement in neighborhoods in Boston, but also around the Commonwealth. One of the things that I anticipate you will see as the plan evolves is that sailing will probably move from Boston Harbor to probably Buzzards Bay. That's one of the things, one of the changes we are looking at. That idea came from two places. It came from United States Sailing, the Sports Federation, but it also came from the mayor of New Bedford, who really solicited the opportunity, really came to us and said, you got to look hard at this, and there's a real opportunity here. The point is that venue planning is evolving, and I think it's getting better. I think that we're getting smarter, that's for sure, both by the community engagement and our relationships. But several things remain constant, and they are kind of our first principles of planning. And the first is that we intend to plan the most environmentally, fiscally, and socially sustainable games ever. Goes right to what Ruben talked about. These can be different games. These must be different games. And what we mean by that is simply that, and from an environmental point of view, the games can be a catalyst for a kind of sustainability around the Olympics that is really unique. From a social point of view, what we mean is that there's legacy. There's legacy that in terms of possibilities for housing, possibilities for new open space, possibilities that would not have evolved without the Olympic Games. And obviously fiscal sustainability. We will propose and build no white elephants. If there's not a permanent user, there will not be a permanent venue. It will be a temporary venue. We have been committed from day one, and I think one of the reasons that we were designated by the USOC to a walkable and accessible games. That means accessible by public transit. So that, in fact, the majority of venues, as you know, will be accessible through either commuter rail or MBTA, although there will be venues in the Commonwealth. The point is that we are planning the games to the existing infrastructure, and we're planning the games to the planned infrastructure, both in the city of Boston and in the Commonwealth. And we're planning for legacy. And again, what we mean by that is the games plan in all of its parts should really be judged not by how it performs for 16 or 30 days in the summer of 2024, but if in fact it leaves a better city, it leaves a better Commonwealth. If in fact we are creating true legacy that is meaningful and durable. And lastly, we will leverage existing venues. The games in Boston aren't possible without our partnerships with the universities. We've talked a lot about Harvard, BU, MIT, but also UMass Lowell, UMass Boston, Northeastern. All of these are incredibly important partners. And the universities and colleges around the Commonwealth, which will become the homes for different international teams that would come to the Commonwealth a month or even 2 months early to get acclimated to our culture, to our time zones, to our food, so that they can perform at the highest levels. There are legacy possibilities that accrue to the games in a very, very special way. Number one, improved social resilience. What we really mean by that is the opportunity for venues like the Olympic Village to be the catalyst for mixed income housing possibilities that really can be transformative, that really can make a difference and that can be durable long after the games. This means investment in neighborhoods. It also has to do with attracting and retaining talent in and around the city, not only in the city, but around the city as well, that sustains jobs. Reinvestment in the public realm. There are a number of venues that are planned on sites that are either City of Boston sites or Commonwealth sites, public land owned by the Commonwealth. And in many cases, these are public parks, recreation spaces that are wonderful spaces but haven't seen true reinvestment in many years. And the commitment is leave the space better than you found it, meaning with enhanced recreation spaces, tennis courts, softball fields, soccer fields, dog runs, all of the things that enhance our everyday life. Infrastructure. We're all very conscious of infrastructure after this winter, as the mayor said. But the games, they won't solve all of our infrastructure problems, but they have already been a catalyst for a lot of good dialogue, and they can be a catalyst for action as well. The opportunity to create better connections, enhance the connections that we have, not only within the city, but in different places connecting to surrounding communities. New technology. We've talked about housing, Olympic Village housing, that could be modular, that could be reusable. That has two benefits. One, it is a kind of ripple effect to future games, transportable to future games. I don't mean the housing itself, I mean the technology. But I think it's important also to how we think about building housing, especially affordable housing, going forward all over the Commonwealth in ways that are less expensive, more durable, and in fact can support all kinds of mixed income families. Environmental resiliency. We're not going to solve the problems of climate change, but I have to tell you that every single one of these meetings that I have been involved with, either in the city or in the Commonwealth, someone has asked questions about climate change. We are very engaged in our plan in the waterfront. We have to think about issues around climate change. We have to bring technology to those issues, and those are, again, lessons that can be a ripple effect locally in how we deal with climate change in the Commonwealth. And then lastly, our innovation economy. We are fortunate in Eastern Massachusetts in many ways in terms of the jobs that are generated by colleges and universities. But we know that those jobs and that entrepreneurship and that innovation is very much driven by closeness, proximity, connections, and all of the things that we are thinking about and talking about in terms of infrastructure have to do with enhancing those kinds of connections. I think everybody by this time has seen this plan that was submitted in December. As I said, this plan is evolving, but it's really based on these two clusters. It's based on one cluster that we call the waterfront cluster, which is in and around the harbor. It includes an Olympic Village at UMass Boston, where there is a real legacy in terms of housing, a large portion of which can become student housing, converted to student housing after the games for UMass Boston. The remainder of the housing can become market rate housing. It can be repurposed housing, but again, producing a true legacy that will be lasting well beyond 2024. A temporary stadium at what we're calling Midtown. That stadium will disappear after the games, but the infrastructure that's put in place, physical infrastructure, will be the platform for development on a site that has some of the very best transit, not only in Massachusetts, but probably in New England. So it produces the kind of housing, the kind of mixed-use development that truly is transit-oriented, that goes to sustainability, that changes the kinds of mode splits that we see in and around the city, and really is the kind of development that we want to see. It's not sprawl, it's development into the core. And then the use of the facilities that already exist at the Boston Convention Center. That's a key part of the plan. It was a key part of London's plan at Excel Center. It's using facilities that already exist. The second cluster is what we call the university cluster. It is really the intersection of Harvard, BU, and MIT. It's on land that's currently occupied by decommissioned rail lines, CSX rail lines, and some off and on ramps off of the Mass Pike that will be rebuilt before 2024 as part of the reconfiguration of the Mass Pike. Its legacy will be to enhance that connection between those universities and again be the platform for development of new science and technology spaces in the heart of our innovation economy. I focused a lot on Boston, but there is venue planning in other communities in the Commonwealth, in Somerville at Assembly Square, in Lowell at Songus Arena and on the Merrimack River, Shelburne Falls, on the Deerfield River, and as I mentioned, in New Bedford, the possibility of sailing in New Bedford. We are looking for the best venues. We are looking, though, for venues that really do align with a shared vision, both for the city of Boston, for the Commonwealth, that have durability, that have a legacy, that will be tangible, so that the games are not about 16 or 30 days in the summer of 2024. The games are about being a catalyst for a vision for the Commonwealth and for the city that truly is lasting. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Now on to budget. Folks ask us very often, and rightfully so, how are these games going to be funded? Who pays for it? I want to make one point abundantly clear, that no public funding will be used for venues construction or the overall games operations. The way we see the budget broken down, generally speaking, into the three buckets that you see here. The operating budget, again, all privately funded by various sources of revenue, including sponsorships from International Olympic sponsors, TV broadcast revenue. The International Olympic Committee recently signed a contract with NBC to broadcast the games straight through to 2032. So the broadcast revenue is a significant portion of the revenue to fund the operating budget of the games, and ticket sales as well. And by operating budget, we mean anything that it takes to feed the athletes, move them around, et cetera. The non-operating budget, or sort of the capital budget, if you will, is a combination of public-private partnerships mainly focused on some of the land assembly that's required and ownership of that land. And that, as David had mentioned earlier, would be focused on the construction of the Olympic Village, the Athletes Village, the stadium, and the International Broadcast Center. The security budget is where we would expect public funding to occur in partnership with the federal government. Now, certainly with an event of this magnitude, of this scale, with the number of people that are involved and the dignitaries who are involved, this is certainly a task that no one entity can take on its own. So we would need to partner with the federal government on planning and implementation as well, but of course on the funding. And just to be clear as well, we already do that for games, whether they're here in the US or abroad as well. Our federal government does fund for security of our athletes abroad as well. We would need to seek a National Special Security Event designation through the Federal Department of Homeland Security. And again, to be very clear, if we are not able to count on funding for the federal government for security, then we will not host these games in Boston, and quite frankly, we will not host these games in the United States. So it becomes a bigger question of whether we as Americans, we as a country, want to continue to host the Olympic Games, Olympic and Paralympic Games here in the US. Just a quick note on the budget. Now, the fun stuff. We want Lawrence and we want the Merrimack Valley region to be involved in this effort. We certainly understand that, as David mentioned, the majority of the venues and events would be in the city of Boston, but we know and we certainly recognize that this can be and will be a regional effort and a statewide effort in partnership with mayors like Mayor Rivera and others across the state. Regional opportunities include the training camps that David mentioned earlier. Some of the national Olympic committees and teams will come to the host city several months in advance to train and acclimate. And preliminary and test events are also other opportunities, those events that would happen in the year or two leading up to the games. I mentioned tourism and hospitality earlier, but there's a great opportunity in this region for folks who attend the games to stay in hotels here in the Merrimack Valley here in Lawrence. Youth programs as well, very important one, and one of our top priorities at Boston 2024. This is our effort to connect our athletes like Ruben and his fellow Olympians to our communities. So athletes in our schools, in our community centers, working with kids, teaching them how to train to be an elite athlete, what it means to promote the values of Olympism and the connection of youth to sport and mind-body wellness. So that's a very exciting opportunity that we think we can replicate across the Commonwealth. And finally, the Olympic Torch Relay. If we are so lucky to be selected as the host city, we want and will commit to communities across the Commonwealth to be part of that torch relay. Just imagine, Mary, the Olympic torch coming through your city in 2024. The Cultural Olympiad is another exciting opportunity. This is a requirement of the IOC of its host committee. However, we know that we can do it bigger and better here in Massachusetts in the years leading up to the games. This is an opportunity to highlight and promote and celebrate the vast art and culture treasures that we have here in the Commonwealth, here in the Merrimack Valley, here in Lawrence, from the Berkshires to Worcester to the Cape and everywhere in between. Just as an example, London really had a great Cultural Olympiad. You see some of the numbers. They had 4 years leading up to the games, and everything from dance to music to theater to poetry slams and readings. Those were some of the things they did in London, and we know we can do that and more here in Massachusetts. Just wanted to share some recent updates from 2024. You may have heard a couple of weeks ago we announced new members to our board. You may see some familiar faces up there. We're very excited about our new board members joining our team. This team will continue to grow as we move forward, and it represents a diverse cross-section of sports, business, and civic leaders whose expertise and talent will be critical as we continue to pursue this opportunity. Another exciting update is a localization effort that we're starting to develop. We're working on developing a plan to involve local businesses in contracting and vending opportunities as we continue to bid, and certainly get these small and local businesses, minority, women, and veterans-owned businesses ready to compete and build a pipeline for them to compete and to provide services during the bid process and also throughout the games as well. Workforce development for sure, partnering with government entities, labor leaders, and community leaders to think about how, again, we build that pipeline for workforce development so that folks are ready and prepared for employment when the games do come. And as we know, as we saw from the numbers earlier, the jobs are going to be there. Quick note on process. David started talking about it a little bit earlier, but just to give you a sense of some of the key dates and milestones coming up. As we continue our community engagement over the next few months, we will hear your feedback, we will hear feedback from your neighbors across the state, and incorporate that into our planning efforts. We anticipate that sometime this summer, we'll come back out to the communities with some revisions to our plans and continue to get more feedback in preparation for our first official bid submission to the International Olympic Committee in January of 2016. As we all know, and the mayor mentioned earlier, we are supporting a statewide referendum on the ballot in November 2016, and the final decision by the IOC will be made by late summer, early fall of 2017 in Lima, Peru. We want you to join Team Boston 2024, so if you are interested in volunteering or internship opportunities for the summer, we're closing in on our deadline for the summer, but certainly if you have students who are interested in fall internship opportunities, please have them contact us. We'd love for you to work with us to help us share information with your communities, with your neighbors, with your families about the bid effort. And certainly any other questions or comments or feedback that you may have, please feel free to share them with us. That ends our formal presentation, if you will, and we are looking forward to your questions now and your comments. As I mentioned earlier, just friendly reminder about our ground rules that we would ask that folks keep in mind, that you be concise, constructive, and respectful, and we certainly will do the same. We want to hear from as many folks as we can this evening. And I will ask the Mayor to... Welcome back, Mayor. So folks, if you have a question or want to share a comment, feel free to come down to the microphone and we'll start to answer some of those questions. Oh, thank you. And we'll start to answer some of your questions as well.
Good evening, folks. My name's Dick Russell. I'm probably considered a political loose cannon, but I have 3 questions. Now, this is directed towards, I think your name is Mr. Manfredi. I hope I have the name correct.
You do.
First of all, do we have any guarantee that this whole operation is not going to develop into a big dig type fiasco? Okay? We have years of infrastructure neglect. Do you fully believe that if Boston 2024 gets the bid, that the state can repair all of this neglect in both the roadways and the transportation systems in 7 years? Where is this money going to come from? Is it going to come from our pockets? I probably should, but I won't go there. I know why a lot of the stuff never gets done. And the last question I have, has anything been considered about using Fort Devens as a possible site? I know there's a lot of land up there that's it's run, controlled by some agency of Massachusetts. I appreciate any answers you could give. Thank you.
Sure. I'll start. I think this is on. I'll start at the back and work my way up. First, with Fort Devens, we have been to Fort Devens, and we have looked at Fort Devens as part of this process that we are going through now, refining the venue planning. We've looked at Fort Devens actually for several different venues, and we have done a little bit of planning on at Fort Devens. We've had one meeting up there with our master planning committee. As the plan evolves, you will see Fort Devens as a possible site, but we have considered it. One of the issues on some of these sites is proximity and travel time. And when travel time exceeds, for the athletes I mean, certain durations, the IOC requires that there be a second satellite village. That's an issue because it's expensive, and so that may be an issue. But we have looked at it, and we certainly haven't eliminated it. You asked about infrastructure neglect. The Olympic Games in Boston and in the Commonwealth aren't going to solve all of our infrastructure problems for sure. But I will say one thing, that the Olympics are really not about vehicular transportation. One of the interesting things about the Olympics is, as you plan all of these 33 different venues, there is almost no parking planned as part of Olympic planning, because guests are not, the spectators are not invited to drive. In fact, they are very much discouraged from driving. What London did, and it was very successful in London, when you got your tickets, if you were awarded your tickets through lottery or whatever means for an event at a venue, part of your ticket price was the public transit that went with it. So if you were, the analog would be if you were going to Midtown to the stadium for a track event, you would get your ticket for that event or for those series of events, and you would also get your T-Pass. And so your parking might be, depending where you're coming from, at the Riverside station on the red line, on the green line, and then you take the T in. Because that's really how Olympic planning goes. There's no planning for parking. The only part, there is a little bit, and it's really about handicapped accessibility. And then I think your first question I wrote down guarantees, but now I don't remember exactly what your question was. But I'll say this. Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think it goes to this. You know, I won't say there's going to be a guarantee that there's never any public money. Nico already talked about the fact that that security would be provided by the Secret Service. It would be a national special security event, and you might consider that not you might. That's supported by your federal taxes. The pledge is that there is no public money to venues and to the operations of the games. And the key to that is that these games have to be run like a business. And I think everybody has in their head, and it's completely reasonable that you would, that you saw ridiculous money spent in Sochi. You saw extraordinary money spent in Beijing. Those games were games developed and funded by governments who had a separate agenda besides sport. That agenda, I'm not being pejorative in any way. They had their own agenda, they had their own goals, and they spent money to achieve those goals. Our agenda is far more simple. Our agenda is to propose a games that really is about sports. It's about youth and sports. To produce venues that fulfill all of the requirements without all of the excessive spend that you saw in many recent games. And the IOC will tell you, and has told us through the USOC, that it's not them, it's not the IOC that requires stadiums like the Birdcage in Beijing or what's being called the Frog in Tokyo. Those are decisions made by those countries. Our decisions have to be business decisions. This has to be run like a business. And just as the chart that Nico talked to, revenue has to match expenses and vice versa. And if revenue does not meet the projections expected in terms of, some of that revenue is literally guaranteed, the revenue around contribution from NBC. That contract has been signed. Wherever the games go, that revenue will be there. But maybe the projections of sponsorship don't in fact fulfill those expectations. You got to run it like a business. You got to run it like your household. The revenue has to match the expenses, and any games in the United States ever will have to be run that way. If it's not possible in Boston, it's not going to be possible ever again in the United States. Now, you might say, so be it. But we believe it's a worthy venture.
David, we've been asked and reminded to speak directly into the mic so that the folks at home in the live stream can hear your fantastic answers. Next question. Anybody else have a comment or a question or some thoughts about the principles that we've shared?
Hi, I'm Jim, Jim O'Donoghue. A lot of people know me by my middle name of Patrick, so I go by James Patrick O'Donoghue. I see this as a great opportunity for the Commonwealth and not only the city of Boston, but for us also up here in Lawrence. And I think that even though you want to keep the public investment out of it, there are things that our Commonwealth and the federal government can do to enhance the Olympics that would also help our particular city. Now, Lawrence is strategically directly north of Boston. We have existing rail lines that cross through our city that connect each of our downtowns together, and even our airport is right off, very close to one of those lines. Our airport has a 5,000-foot runway, which is the same size that was put into Boston's Logan Airport a few years back to handle the commuters from the New England region. And that runway now interferes with a lot of the other air traffic. So I think of the idea of using Lawrence's municipal airport for backup for commuter airlines during the Olympics is a great idea. Not only that, we can use that even on a permanent basis to relieve Logan. And I'm involved in something which is magnetic levitation. We have a company out in Devons, by the way, called Magnemotion, that is the only surviving magnetic levitation company in the United States. They're industrial, and they manufacture, they use the technologies for elevators for the naval ships, and they have also for conveyors and that for manufacturing. The technology is used. I'm a patented inventor in that field, in the high-speed rail end of it. Some of the components that I worked on were borrowed and used in the Shanghai, China train. Recently, there was a television newsreel that ran about the Japanese maglev, and if you put that particular system from Lawrence to Boston, you'd be from Lawrence to Boston in less than 5 minutes, and that includes your takeoff time, basically, and landing. That, however, is a technology which fills with ice and snow, so it's not suitable for the winter. But the one in Shanghai is suitable for all year round. And also, there are other companies here in the Commonwealth that we have. Olev Technologies in Boston is working with online electric vehicle charging. And that technology can be used in a magnetic levitation system. And there are other companies that have worked on railroads and that. So it's possible to bring industries together and build a consortium that could bring technology here that would enhance the Olympics. We have a lot of great things going on in Lawrence, and I don't want to discuss them, but the mayor certainly knows about them because he has really spearheaded some great changes, and there's a lot in the works. And we're going to have a more walkable community when everything is done, and I think it's going to be very exciting, and I'd like to see, us play a bigger role in supporting the Olympics.
Thank you very much, James Patrick O'Donoghue. Nice to meet you. And we certainly agree with you, and as David mentioned earlier on the legacy opportunity, the opportunity to use the games to catalyze this type of innovation and technology development certainly is possible, and it's these creative ideas and big thinking and bold thinking that we welcome, and we will look forward to working with you and the mayor and the innovative companies here in Lawrence. Next question or comment? Folks, feel free to just come right on up.
Hello, welcome to Lawrence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for having this opportunity. I did a lot of research when I heard of the Boston Olympics being in this, great opportunity. And I think that I looked at the pros and the cons, and I'm totally in the idea of having the Olympics. And the one thing that they said for the pros is that it brought a lot of business to the community once the Olympics was over. So, there was a good opportunity with the whole entire city that had them in their areas, and it brought money into the community afterwards, and they didn't suffer afterwards. So I thought it was a good opportunity. But I just wanted to say thank you for coming here,
and
thank you for including Lawrence residents. Denise Peral, thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you for having us. Come on down, sir.
Hello, my name is John Morgan, and I want to be a little specific. What are the current plans of possibilities for which sports, which venues might be located up here in the Merrimack Valley? And if there are any, what are the implications as far as required facilities, infrastructure? And you made a mention about no parking. If that is the case up here, yes, we have commuter rail, but we don't, we have bus service, but we don't have anything more than that as far as I know. So I guess those are my questions.
Great questions. David?
The two venues that were part of the December submission in the Merrimack River Valley are rowing in the Merrimack River and boxing at Songus Arena. Rowing on the Merrimack would require a satellite village because of the number of athletes involved and because of the distance. That satellite village, we have studied the possibility of that satellite village being at UMass Lowell. The finish line actually of the proposed course on the Merrimack would be basically right at the western tip of the UMass Lowell campus, where some of their most recent housing has been built. They also have a series of surface parking lots that would be ideal for some of the support temporary buildings that go with hosting a venue like rowing. Everything from ceremonies to operations to broadcast. And so we have studied the Merrimack. We've studied the flow of the river, the ability to control the flow of the river, all of the adjacent land control, and looking hard at rowing it on the Merrimack. And then at Songus, as I said, boxing was part of our plan in December. There's a rich history of boxing, obviously, in this area. Mickey Ward, the movie, The Fighter. So that's a natural connection. You had a second part to your question.
Transportation and parking.
So, that's a very good question, because we do expect that rowing will be very attractive here. It's obviously a big sport in New England. The head of the Charles draws enormous crowds. There is commuter rail, and we would take advantage of the commuter rail. You probably have pointed out, and that's you make a very good point. Those 4 or 5 venues that I mentioned, certainly not Somerville, because there's a new Orange Line station there, but venues in Shelburne Falls or in New Bedford don't have the kind of transit access that the venues in Boston, Cambridge do, and so there will be vehicular traffic for spectators. The athletes are all bused, and there will be what's called an Olympic Travel Network, which means that while in the case of rowing, they actually are located, they would stay on site, so they really only come up once and then leave at the end of the competition. I believe that rowing is 12 days, but I'm not sure about that. And then they return. One of the things about satellite villages is when you do a satellite village, that does not relieve the requirement for beds in the main village. You have to have the full complement of beds in the main village, because the athletes return to the main village after their competition.
I will say, can I just real quick about the transportation? We have the MBRTA in the Merrimack Valley, but also in Lowell, it's the Lowell Regional Transit Authority. And so their ability to move people, they do it every day in support of an event like this. I'm sure that they would reach out to places like the MBRTA on this side of the valley to support that effort and getting people around. And they're pretty big, comfortable buses. If you've been to the new downtown circular bus we have in Lawrence, or if you've ever been taking the bus from Lawrence to Lowell to go to UMass, you know that they're actually pretty decent buses.
And I'd like to add a little bit too. As a resident of Lowell, we do have a lot of activities already right next to the river, where we expect to have the rowing competition. We have the Cambodian Festival. We have some of the rowing competitions by UMass Lowell, where we bring hundreds of teams to compete at UMass Lowell. And there is a lot of parking there, and there's a lot of space. And recently, UMass Lowell, they have upgraded their boathouse, and the Merrimack River Rowing Association, they've been using it a lot more with high schools around the area. So this area is they're very familiar with bigger events, and I think it's a great opportunity to bring the games there.
Great question. Thank you. Good evening.
My name is Maria de la Cruz, and I would like to know what kind of jobs you are going to have for teenagers, for veterans people of any ages at that time.
Sure. It's a very good question. I think, as we mentioned before, the economic impact study conducted by the Boston Foundation, there is a very extraordinary opportunity to create and grow jobs. Yes, certainly in the construction industry, and I think there are some labor unions today who are already starting to think about how we build that pipeline so that young people now are getting the workforce training that they need to be prepared for the jobs that will be available in 2024 with respect to the games. In the tourism and hospitality industry, for sure, our restaurants and hotels and other service-related areas, again, we'll see that boom, perhaps not during the year of the games, and I think the data shows that when the games do come that year, tourism tends to dip, but leading up to that year and then certainly following that year, the industry will continue to grow. So those jobs as well will be certainly available and plentiful. As far as young people go, I think, again, we're in the first summer of a very robust internship program for college students, but we can certainly think creatively about how we engage high school students and then, of course, our middle schoolers and young people. If you think kids who are in 3rd and 4th grade now will be just the perfect age to not only volunteer, but perhaps compete in the 2024 games, serve as ambassadors, work at the games, and work in those opportunities. So again, those are some of the things that we're starting to think about. Thank you for your question.
Can I get one more thing?
Sure.
First of all, Maria, she represents Senator Barbara Italian's office, so I just want to know that she's here representing him as well. So
thank you.
The senator's a big supporter. The other piece that I think is really cool about this, especially for Lawrence, is the ability to be part of that battalion of people that have to be in the volunteer community. And we have so many young people that are already involved in a lot of the volunteerism that goes on in our city, but in support of the work that's going to happen in Lowell, if that's the venues they go with, to be able to have our kids, and I say kids, but our teenagers really, be part of that support for the volunteerism, for me is very exciting, because it's going to infuse that immigrant spirit that we have here in Lawrence into that volunteer crew.
Nico, just to add on, even though the Olympics will be less than a month, during that entire time, from opening ceremonies to closing ceremonies, the Olympic Games will actually be a lifetime event for this region. I had the opportunity to go visit Montreal, where they had the Olympic Games there, and it is amazing to see how many people actually still go there, decades and decades later, to visit the actual site where they had the games. So this isn't just a 1 year or 1 month event. This is going to be for decades and decades. People are going to come to the region because they want to see where the Olympic Games was.
Thanks, Ruben. Great point. Hello, sir.
Hello. My name is Peter Griffin. I live in Windham, New Hampshire, about 20 minutes north of here. Mayor Rivera, I want to commend you on what you're doing for Lawrence. My family was from Lawrence originally. I spent my whole childhood in Lawrence. I had relatives that were teachers in Lawrence. I do a lot of community service work. I'm president of an organization that's trying to restore passenger rail service to New Hampshire. And I'm also have served on 2 regional planning commissions. So I'm very much involved with transportation, economic development. The transportation portion, I'm glad you're emphasizing that, because that will be one of the great tangibles that will remain after the Olympics. It's just not simply widening roads. It's how you define a transportation system. I would like to encourage Mayor Rivera to look at the history of Essex County. It's just not being connected to Boston, but how can these great cities within Essex County be connected to one another and maximize the job opportunities? For instance, if you look at the South Shore, they've reclaimed a lot of old historic rail lines to Situate, Middleborough, Lakeville. Expectation is it will go to New Bedford to Fall River. There is an equal number of historic rail corridors in Essex County which are underutilized, and you might want to consider pulling together a group of your fellow mayors, chambers of commerce, economic development people, and just think about, as part of the Olympics and part of the 800-pound gorilla of Boston and its economy, how we can improve the transportation system of this area. And one last thing too, I know you, Mr. Manfredi, you were talking about the need for villages beyond a certain point. You might want to consider also the Downeaster Rail Service, which has a stop at University of New Hampshire. It's in the middle of the campus, and it would be easily accessible. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great feedback. And we certainly agree the conversations around regional planning in general, really, we see it in the city, we see it elsewhere. These are conversations that we know need to happen for the continued growth of our cities, our regions, but can continue to further be enhanced around the games conversations as well. Hi, good evening.
Hi, my name is Jay Rivera. I'm very involved in the community, and just, I think there's been great questions. I just have one that I think a lot of us should be asking ourselves is, what is the role of Lawrence in this whole process, other than kind of just the referendum and stuff like that, what can we do to help this become a much better experience for everybody in the Commonwealth? So yeah, that's my question.
Excellent questions. Mayor, do you want to take that one, or do you want? I have some. I think we at 2024 have some ideas, but certainly want to hear yours too.
I think about, I did an op-ed letter with the mayor of Salem, and Salem's not necessarily a site, and Lawrence not necessarily a site, but we have facilities in support of other sites, like we talked about. Again, having infrastructure that could hold an actual event is not likely. However, they talked about the cultural events that have to happen the 4 years leading up to it. And, we can't compete with Lowell in the sense of having an arena or having the Lowell Auditorium, but we are basically immigrant culture for Massachusetts. Consider ourselves like little Ellis Island. So when people come here from abroad and they want to see where their ancestors came through to become Americans, they have to come to Lawrence. So we hope that we're going to play a bigger role in the cultural experience of the games and the cultural experience of the people that come here to participate in them, but also in support of them. And I've talked about not only having, because Lawrence is the workforce for the Merrimack Valley, not only having workers that can get into these venues and help them build them, and whatever transportation projects that get built, again, being part of that effort, but again, being part of the overall experience when the people come to the games. That's how I see it.
We certainly agree with you, Mayor, and thank you very much for that wonderful op-ed that you and Mayor Driscoll wrote earlier this week. I would also add, Jay, that I think you're already starting to do exactly what we need your help with, which is sharing creative ideas. To Mr. O'Donoghue's point